Hello viewers, and a warm welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be working meatless. With that said, we're going to be making a very beautiful burger made from some soy chunks. I'll also be showing you how to plate this very simply and give you some tips on basically enjoying a very hearty meal without actually bringing any cancerous chances of or rather bringing any cancerous infections to your meat or to your dish particularly. Now, having mentioned that, we're going to proceed to introduce the ingredients before us, just to give you an idea of what to expect for this show. So from the very front, I've got some soy sauce, about a tablespoon. You'll also require a tablespoon of nutmeg, about 2 tablespoons of ketchup, and 1.5 tablespoons of English mustard. You'll also require 1 medium-sized onion, 1 raw egg, and about half an iceberg lettuce, washed and clean of course. You'll also require about 2 medium-sized tomatoes, some fresh coriander, about 2 sesame buns split right through the middle. You'll also require some breadcrumbs and some salt. You'll also require about 200 grams of some soy chunks, a couple of peppercorns to crush, some oil to cook with, and last but not least, a cucumber, which we'll be using in the plating process. But before we get there, we're going to allow you this chance to refresh yourselves, sit back, unwind, and we'll catch you after a very short break. Welcome back viewers. For those of you who missed on the introduction, we're going to be working on a meatless burger today. That being said, we're going to be working with some soy burgers. So very simple process of starting this. So in the bowl here, I've got about 200 grams of some soy chunks. You should be able to find this at your retail regular stores. It's actually a very cheap product, so you should actually be able to find this almost anywhere in the city. So we're going to start the process very simply by soaking this, and we're going to give that anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. So proceed to add a whole bowl of water, or about 2 cups, into your soy chunk plate, and very simply you can use a spoon to just press them down, making sure that all or some of your chunks are pretty much completely soaked. And this particularly will always take a bit of time to absorb the liquid, and it will actually be resting on the side while we proceed. So you can proceed to always soak that a little bit in advance, anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes before you begin your process of preparing your ingredients. And this will allow you enough time for them to soak up the liquid and proceed to mix with the rest. Now to that, we're also going to be making some of the condiments that we will be plating our burger with. So I'm going to start the process very simply by slicing up some tomato slices. So begin by taking the stem end off and proceed to slice some very evenly sliced slices of tomato, and proceed to do so till you get to the very end. It never hurts to have a little bit extra tomato in your burger, so we're going to allow for that option, and you can pretty much discard the rest of your pieces. So very simply with this, we're going to slide those onto a plate on the side. And one particular good addition to a slice of tomato, especially if you're going to be plating a burger, always season your tomatoes as well. So we're going to season that with some salt. The beautiful thing about salt for this process will allow for you to dehydrate your tomatoes very, very nicely. Also infuses a bit of kick into the juice and allows for you to have a nice, tasty tomato. Last but not least, crush over some black peppercorns. And this will basically enhance the beautiful flavor of the tomatoes by giving it a bit of crunch and a bit of heat. Simple as that. Now next up, we're going to proceed to clean our lettuce. But before you proceed, always make sure to have a nice, clean, dry board. Very important to mention that fluids, particularly on wet or on working surfaces, do aid in transferring a bit of germs. So always be sure to dry your work surface. And if you are going to be working with meat and vegetable, probably make an arrangement to have an extra chopping board, or probably turn it over, making sure not to contaminate all of your ingredients. So we're going to proceed to chop up some of this beautiful lettuce. And I'm going to begin the process by just opening up those leaves. Remember, we are going to be using this to build up our burger, so you may want to find that nice, beautiful heart center. And you can proceed to peel your lettuce from this point. Of course, making sure to always break the thick, stemmy ends. Remember, these are particularly chewy and very hard to bite onto. So be sure to just break your lettuce up completely, and you can proceed to just tear that up with your hands. And as I said, always begin by taking out the outermost part of the lettuce. Remember, it's actually more watery and less tasty. So proceed to do so right up until you've got about half of your lettuce piece completely torn up. And we can proceed to reserve this on the side. All right, so we now have 2 out of our 3 toppings ready. The last and final one will be our cucumber. So we're going to do the same thing we did for the tomatoes. Very simply begin by halving your cucumber, and you can reserve the rest of that. And for this particular process, I'm not going to be using the seeds of the cucumber, but just the flesh. So very simply begin by slicing off a wedge from your cucumber. Place your piece of cucumber onto a chopping board, and very simply using a knife, proceed to slice that very, very thinly. Of course, taking very much precaution in making sure that you don't slice your fingernails or your fingertips. And you can also be able to achieve the same consistency by using a mandolin if you have one. But for those of you who may not have one, this is particularly done just for you. Now proceed to slice your cucumber very, very thinly until you get to the very base. Proceed to lay them right over each other on your board, and you can proceed to remove the rest from your counter and reserve for later. Now very simply season once more with some salt and some black peppercorns. If you do as well have some lemon juice or some fresh limes, you can squeeze that right over. It will always impact a nice, beautiful citrus flavor. Right, so while those continue to marinate and pickle very, very gently undisturbed on the side, we're going to allow those to sit right up until we're ready to plate. So we're going to leave those right at the back here. Right, now next up we're going to begin to make our burger mixture, which is particularly using the soy chunks and not meat. So very simply begin by allowing the liquid to drain completely right over your sink. And you can reserve just a little bit of liquid in there, which is going to aid you in getting those breadcrumbs to combine very nicely to your soy chunks. And now next up, proceed to grab a clean bowl. Into that we will proceed to add our breadcrumbs. Remember, this is going to help to bind our burger patty. You're also going to crack in 1 medium-sized egg. And we are going to be using the yolk and the whites. Right now on your chopping board, we're going to also proceed to chop up some fresh coriander. So with a sharp knife, proceed to chop your coriander very coarsely. Making, of course, sure to always remove the stems before you begin chopping. Proceed to add that to your bowl with the breadcrumbs. Right, once that's done, very important to always remember to season your mixture. So begin by adding a pinch of salt and crush in some black peppercorns. We're also going to be incorporating some onion, so I'm going to turn that over and very simply begin by slicing off a small tip from the edge and turn it over. Do the same for the top. Very simple technique to peel an onion. Using your sharp knife, go right through the side, making a very, very shallow incision. And by lifting with your knife, you should be able to expose that beautiful inner core of the onion. And by hand, you can proceed to open that completely. And this will particularly aid you in saving time, and you may actually avoid yourself from tearing. So very simply, begin by slicing that in half. Reserve the rest of your onion. And we're going to proceed to chop this very finely. So begin by slicing some slits right through your onion, but of course always leave just a little bit of margin at the back. Proceed once more to slice right across, of course not cutting right through to the very end, and do the same twice. And very simply proceed to finely chop your onion. You can do this very, very slowly. It will actually give you a bit more grip and a bit more consistency. And right towards the end, proceed to just chop from the side. And you can just bundle the rest of that together and probably give it about 3 or 4 goes. That should aid in giving you a nice, beautiful, even chop right through. Right, so once that's done, proceed to add that to your mixture with the egg. And of course, at this stage, we are also going to be combining this to our soy chunks. So begin by working your mixture by hand. Of course, making sure to get that nice, beautiful mixture very combined. Remember, your egg will actually be your binding agent for this process. So you may want to make sure that this particular process goes very, very well. Be sure to also make sure that you do it in a clean bowl that does not have any water, because this could actually seep into your soy mixture and it could actually cause for your patties to crack open once they hit the pan. And by this stage, you should have an almost wetty, like murky kind of consistency. You should be able to press that into a nice firm ball by hand. And this should be the first checkpoint for your soy mixture. Right, now in the bowl with the soy, we're going to proceed to just squeeze by hand. Of course, making sure to try and break out any bit of water in there. And of course, also reduce the size of the chunks as you tear them by hand. You can also do this by hand, or you can also alternatively chop this by using a sharp knife and mixing it through. But since we're looking for that beautiful rough consistency to our dish, we are going to leave it just at that and proceed to add our breadcrumb mixture, taking very much time, making sure not to waste any of your mixture. And now at this stage we should have about 600 grams worth of some soy chunk mixture. This should be able to make some nice beautiful patties, about 2 pieces of about 250 grams. And all you're going to do now is proceed to squeeze by hand, while you of course proceed to combine your ingredients. You can also do this in a food processor. You can just blitz everything together and probably add your egg right at the end. It will also aid in making sure that you get a nice firm consistency. So this should take you anywhere between 4.5 to 5 minutes. Of course, the soy chunks will take a bit of time to incorporate with your breadcrumbs. But once done, you should actually be able to get a nice firm consistency that should actually be able to hold very nicely by hand. And all we are going to do is invert that mixture onto our chopping board. You can discard your bowl at this stage and proceed to work your mixture by hand. Of course, mashing the mixture between your fingertips will aid in really giving that binding agent quite a bit of advantage. Right, once that's done, proceed to just work your mixture back onto the board by cleaning your hands very clean. You may want to do this by glove if you prefer to do so. I prefer to work by hand because it gives me a bit more control. And working by hand as well always allows for you to feel the texture of your mixture. You can actually be able to tell for the dryness and the wetness a little more easier. And now all you need to do is reconstitute your mixture to the center of your board. And you can split your mixture in two. And very, very gently grab your mixture and by hand proceed to squeeze it on the palm of your hand. Of course, inverting a bit of pressure to make sure that you remove any air pockets from your mixture. And remember, you're going to be doing the same thing for your burger patties, especially if you're doing it with beef. Same process, just a different timing and consistency. Remember, with meat, you always have a bit of that beautiful texture of the fat that allows for you to really do it without adding too much egg or flour or breadcrumbs. But working with soy chunks as well, as I mentioned, it's a very dry mixture, so you may need to work your binding agent before combining the rest of your ingredients. So very simply, once you have that totally combined, proceed to work it into a nice firm ball, squeezing continuously as you proceed, and proceed to tap it right over the top while reconstituting that into something somewhat like a burger patty. Work your way around your board, making sure to incorporate any of the remaining mixture. Pat it down once more, making sure to find a thickness of about anywhere between 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And you can proceed to do the same for the rest of your mixture, bringing us to the first break of the show. So we're going to take a break now and finish combining these beautiful ingredients into some nice workable patties. And we're going to take a short break and clean our station as well. But when we do come back, I'll take you through the process of frying them and I'll also be showing you some nice, beautiful finishes to a very, very simple meatless burger. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, viewers. For those of you who missed out on this and many more episodes that we've covered in the past, you can be able to recap for that on our YouTube page, which is BrandPlus TV. But for that, we're going to be bringing you back to the show now. We are at the last and final step, which is basically the cooking and plating. So for that, very important to always begin by heating up a pan. And to this, the reason why I'm going to be heating two pans is for two reasons. I'm also going to be sealing my bread very, very briefly. So begin by grabbing your patties, and you can turn them out completely. Remember, this was halved a little earlier. Now to this, you're going to just simply begin by drizzling just a bit of that oil right over the top. You can season that with some black peppercorns. Remember, that brings a nice, beautiful kick of flavor to the bread. And very, very simply, we're going to proceed to turn them over onto a hot pan that's already preheated. And you're going to give that anywhere between 10 to 20 seconds just to brown very, very quickly. Of course, by sliding your pieces of bun around your pan, does allow for a nice, more even, more quicker coloring process. You can proceed to turn them over just to have a look. And once they're perfectly golden brown, you can proceed to remove and move on to your plate. And now on the other pan that's now heated up completely, we're going to drizzle some oil, which we're going to be frying with. But of course, very important to make sure that your bread does not overcook. Right, so we should actually be looking for a nice, almost blonde color to your buns. So proceed to just rub those onto your pan a little more. And as soon as you've got your two pieces done, you can proceed to turn that off completely and proceed to move your top pieces of your sesame bun right around your pan. And you can turn those onto your chopping board and allow them to cool off very, very gently. And in the meantime, on the other pan, proceed to toss your pan around a few times, allowing for your oil to coat your pan completely. And all you need to do at this stage is turn your patties onto your hot pan. Of course, always placing them gently, making sure not to splash any oil on yourself. And just very simply let them roll off the side of your hand. That should allow for them to hit the pan very, very gently. And remember as well that those small little gestures with food does make a bit of a difference. Remember, throwing your patty over your pan will actually inconvenience you from getting the same quality. So another tip I could share with you is you can also alternatively just tipple your pan over, allow the oil to drip to the front, and this should allow for you to avoid burning yourself while doing so. Something I'll also share with you, remember, patties do really take quite a bit of time to cook, but very importantly, one tip I could share with you is start your pan off at high heat. Allow the first side to seal, which I'll be able to show you in a little bit. And by sealing, this is basically getting that nice first coloring of your burger patty. So I'm just going to lift that and show you. As you can see, nice color coming through. You can proceed to turn those over. And once that process is done, proceed to lower your temperature to almost medium, somewhere between medium and low. Allow for the second cooking to proceed very, very gently. Remember, this process will be the one that will seal the deal. This is where you get the heat to go right through. And remember, particularly when you're making burgers, you always have 2 steps to doing so. So you always get the process where you get the show side, which is basically the side that you show on the top, which is the best colored side. And remember, then there's the blunted side, which is basically where you actually allow a little bit of cooking to happen. This is particularly the sides that most of us always kind of find a bit of a challenge, especially when you make a patty and you've got one side darker than the other, or particularly not as beautiful as the first side. So this is a blonde side, which will allow to cook a little slower. But remember, if you're going to be sealing your patty on a hot pan, get the nice beautiful color on the first side, turn them over, and this will allow for beautiful burger at the end. You can also drizzle just a little bit of oil over the top. Remember, now that we're working with a meatless burger, remember the soy will actually dry off a little faster. So this may actually call for you to make a little bit of an adjustment to your recipe. So if you are going to be measuring out anywhere between 20 to 30 ml of oil for a regular burger, for a soy burger, you may actually want to move that to about 40 ml. But remember, you should actually go for the healthiest option oil, that way limiting down or bringing down your calorie count. Right, so we're going to lift that just to have a look at the second side, and as you can see, it's always a little darker. We're going to allow that to continue cooking. And another very simple technique to check for doneness, you can always grab a very small knife. Begin by placing your knife right through the center of your patty. Count till about 5 and pull it out. If you still have a bit of the mixture on the side of your knife, you should actually be sure that it's still raw. But if it's a little moist and you've got those nice beautiful drips of oil, that should actually be giving you a count of anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds of cooking. And at this stage, you will actually have to lower your temperature to the lowest possible level. Proceed to turn those over once more. And as you can see, a little bit darker touch of color over the top. Move your patties around the pan very gently as well, making sure to just disperse that excess amount of oil dripping from your burgers or your burger patties. And we're going to allow that anywhere between 10 to 12 seconds to just finish off cooking. And at this stage, you can turn off your heat completely. Now this will bring us to the last and final part of this beautiful process of making our burger patties. But before we get you that far, we'll begin by moving our patties over and place them onto the bun. You are going to turn on your heat once more. And this last and final process is basically just incorporating some of the ingredients we had, which we're going to be making our sauce with. So very, very simply, begin by lowering your heat to very, very low once it's on. Proceed to add a bit of your nutmeg. Add in your soy sauce. And you can move your pan around, allowing that to infuse very, very briefly. And next, proceed to add your ketchup. And proceed to add your mustard. At this point, you can turn your heat off completely. And of course, by using a spoon, proceed to work your mixture right around your pan. Remember, doing this off the heat will limit your sauce from completely reducing or thickening. It will also allow for the infusion to happen very, very gently And of course, it will always give you a nice, beautiful, thick consistency of sauce. Now, this is what I call the 3-part sauce process. So it's a very, very simple process whereby you use the sauces that you are going to add to your burger, infuse them with a bit of heat on a hot pan very, very quickly, same pan that you, of course, used to sear your meat. And by this process, you actually be able to incorporate all the flavors left off on the pan, particularly the flavors we always tempted to just scrub off when we hit the sink. And this will particularly give a beautiful zink to your ketchup. It also gives it a bit of color. And most of all, it actually embraces the flavors before you actually proceed to add those to your patties. So proceed to spread those right over your burger. Spreading very, very gently over the top. Right, very simple process. Now, while we're building up our salad, very, very simple technique. Always begin by your tomatoes. Remember, your tomatoes will actually ooze out some very beautiful juices that will aid in keeping your burger patty moist. So we're going to begin by adding our 3 slices right over each piece. Very simply, proceed to also just wipe your plate with the lettuce. Remember, lettuce does tend to be very, very flat and tasteless. So we're going to just toss that in that bit of tomato juice and the black pepper and salt that's on the plate. And you can proceed to build your burger as you proceed. Repeating the same process for the second piece. Once done plating your lettuce right over your tomatoes, if you do have any leftover from that mixture, always plate that right to one side of your plate. And you can discard the first plate and very simply make a very small ribbon from your cucumber, place that right over your lettuce, and you can proceed to place the other 2 pieces right over your patties. And finish the process off by placing your sesame ends right over the top. And just to complement a burger, always have a bit of fries on the side to serve with. So we're going to pour those right over the front there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my simple take on a soy burger served with some fries and some salad. I do hope you had some fun on the show today, and you are going to be tempted to try out this with this very, very simple and cheap ingredient that's locally purchased. And as you can see, we've managed to be able to prove that you can actually come up with a vegetarian burger from your very own home. As I mentioned, you're not limited to the ingredients we use today. You can also alternatively Google around and probably find some very good vegetarian recipes that you can incorporate to your own homemade burgers. But for this and more, we're going to bid you farewell, thanking you for tuning into the show today, reminding you to always feel free to leave your comments or your queries on our Facebook page, that's BrandPlus TV, and you can also recap on this and any other episodes that you missed out on our YouTube page, that's BrandPlus TV. But for this, thank you once again for tuning in today. I will wish you God's blessings, and until the next episode, do have a lovely evening and see you soon.